Hi guys, and welcome to this episode of Urban Nature Life with Gaz. Hope you enjoy it. These are all my sightings from July. First of all, this month over in the park we've got the Canada geese. Now I quite like these guys, but they are considered a pest after being introduced to the UK in the mid-18th century. These birds have almost changed their behaviour from being a migratory species to actually being resident here. And although their diet can actually contain some invertebrates and very occasionally small fish, these are primarily herbivores, keeping on top of the weed in the pond. Rabbits were native to southwestern Europe, Portugal, western France and Spain, but the Romans in the 12th century introduced them to the British Isles, and now they're a well-established population. They're now found all over, including right down by the seafront. This is just between the sandcastle and the pleasure beach, and interestingly enough, even in the middle of the night, these guys tend to use the crossings in the middle of the car park. Further on past the rabbits, I then got a chance to sit on the sea wall and watch some terns hunting in the early morning. Now this is great to watch with lots of really cool hunting behaviour and even some successful catches as well. As these birds are hunting, they'll stare down at the water and very occasionally just flick their head up to look forward in front of them before returning to staring back down in the water in search of the fish that they hunt. Like with all predators, not every hunt's successful, but this tern, it had a little dive, missed whatever it went for, and then actually came up, looped back round the same area and stopped momentarily over the same piece of water, maybe in search of that fish it missed. And eventually, a strong and purposeful dive, punching into the water and coming up with a meal for this little tern. And if you look carefully, you can even see a small white baitfish flapping around in this bird's mouth as it flies off. This tern flying with his catch in his mouth looked like he wanted to share it with possibly a mate, and then thought better of it and flew off and kept that little fish to himself. Also flying past were little groups of oyster catchers moving up and down the beach. But meanwhile, back up on top of the hospital, that pair of oyster catchers are still sat tight. Now, although they can go down to the beach and feed on their natural diet of things like cockles, mussels and other small marine invertebrates, these guys, they use the golf course, I think maybe to go and find a worm or two. Whilst it's dry, garden snails tend to be relatively inactive, just sitting around out in the trees. Now, when it rains, these guys resume their normal behaviour, and at this time of year you'll often see them mating out on the edges of paths if you look carefully. The banded snails also follow the same procedure, and when it rains this can be a dangerous time because that's when the predators know that these little guys are out and about. With birds like thrushes not only being famous for their song, but also for the way they break the snails open on little rocks. Once the sun had come back out and the rain has stopped, I started to see lots of butterflies. Now these guys, like this little common butterfly, sometimes will spend their time on the ground, and sometimes this is in the pursuit of picking up the minerals from the earth itself. Now this little guy got disturbed by a fly though. And of course there are other species about, such as this painted lady, which are still very abundant, red admirals, and even peacock butterflies. Now a good place to find these guys is often to have a look at buddleia bushes, and these plants are often known as butterfly bushes because of that amazing ability to attract butterflies as well as other inverts as well. And of course, the primary reason to go and visit a butterfly bush, if you're a butterfly, is to feed. And you can see this peacock butterfly feeding, placing its proboscis down into the centre of each flower to lap up the nectar within. Other butterflies, such as the speckled wood and these skippers, I was finding out in the paths around the meadow areas of Blackpool. And these areas, as you can hear, are also great for small animals like grasshoppers. Now these are incredibly hard to see, but when you do see them, they're fantastic little creatures just to observe. These guys don't seem to have much need to move from an area, as they feed on the vegetation around them and can even breed in this area as well. And meadow areas like this are fantastic for finding all kinds of little invertebrates if you look carefully, just like this little beetle who flew off. Feeding out on this soak path, picking up all kinds of small little food items, we've got this adult robin. Now this time of year you also see the juvenile robins, which you can tell from the adults because of their spotty appearance. But unlike the confident adults, these guys are slightly more elusive and a bit harder to find. With a broad ranging diet, birds like this blackbird here can find it fairly easy to get on in the UK. Now these birds don't only eat the worms, but they'll also take bits of fruit just like this. But if there are worms on the table, what blackbird's going to say no? Now once the blackbirds leave the nest, the chicks will still follow their parents around in the pursuit of food, and you can watch this young one here waiting for his father to go and pick up the food that he's collected and then go and beg for it. But this is the age where they start to learn some independence and will also start looking for food themselves and not solely relying on those adults. And when it comes to birds like this heron, I just love this bit of footage because you can't beat a fishing bird sitting on a no fishing sign. And also, just like the terns out on the sea, these little black-headed gulls on the lakes, they seem to fly around in the pursuit of food in the same way, looking down at the water's surface for any morsel of food that they may be able to eat before swooping down, picking it up, and then carrying on. But unlike the terns that seem to take off almost instantly, the black-headed gulls, they seem to have a little bit more patience and a little bit more confidence on the water's surface and will sit there for just a while whilst they sort out whatever they've managed to grab hold of. Also, found on small bodies of water, especially on still calm days, you see lots of pond skaters. Now these guys seem to search the top of the water, going from one piece of debris to the next. These guys stay on top of the water by spreading their body weight across the surface, not breaking the film or the surface tension, which means that they can skate along the top effortlessly. Feeding stations where people put food out for these animals are often great places to see interspecies animal interactions. And in this little section we see the interactions between a pigeon, a squirrel and a magpie. At first the pigeon, not looking too interested in the food, also didn't look too keen on having the magpie jump down next to him. And once the pigeon had jumped up on the log, the magpie went down to go and find what the pigeon was looking at, to then be disturbed by a squirrel. And this squirrel clearly knew where he was going and what he was doing, because he ran straight across and then straight to a peanut which had been left in the undergrowth. The ants at this time of year start to become very active, with the new queens big enough and strong enough and also fully winged so they can fly off and start to find their own nests. Unfortunately, this can be quite a vulnerable time, and these ants at this stage are very prone to predation, especially from birds and spiders like this. But with sheer volume of numbers, some fly off, lose their wings, mate with a male, and then start to build their own nests, like this little guy on the curb. Returning to the herringull nest from the last video, it's been 3 weeks and the chicks have now hatched. Another addition to the UK wildlife is the introduction of the red-legged partridge. Now these birds were introduced to Britain quite a few years ago in 1770, and they've spread across the country. Albeit they do have a natural breeding population here, lots of them are still bred in captivity and then released to go out for shoots. Well, I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. If you have, make sure you hit the subscribe button just down here and check out my last video on nature just over here and my playlist up there.